Alexander Litvinenko met a slow, painful death, poisoned by radioactive polonium. Today, a judge concluded he was killed in an operation by the Russian Security Service, the FSB, likely authorised at the highest level.
The FSB operation to kill Mr Litvinenko was probably approved by Mr Patrushev, then head of the FSB, and also by President Putin.
Litvinenko was a former Russian intelligence officer who'd spoken out about corruption and then fled with his family to Britain. In 2006, he came to this central London hotel to meet two Russians, former FSB officer Andrei Lugovoy and Dmitry Kovtun, both caught here on CCTV. In the Pine Bar, Litvinenko was served a drink from this teapot, which was laced with radioactive polonium. Police would later be able to follow a trail of radioactivity across London, from restaurants to football stadiums, all leaving the public at risk. It took Litvinenko himself 3 weeks to die. But why was he killed?
There were audible gasps here in court when the judge said responsibility probably lay at the highest levels of the Kremlin. And this report argues the motive was that Litvinenko was viewed in Russia as a traitor.
Litvinenko was so hated that Russian special forces used his image for target practice. Today's report says his accusations that the FSB was behind these bombings of apartments in Moscow to justify a war, as well as his disclosures about corruption and a personal animosity with Vladimir Putin, all made him a target. And then there was also the fact that the Russians learnt he'd begun working with Britain's intelligence service, MI6. Today, his widow, who fought for years for this inquiry, told me the British government should now expel all Russian spies in their London embassy and impose travel bans and sanctions on top officials.
What I did, it's not against Russia. It's not against Russian people. I believe only these things might help Russian people one day to receive brighter future.
Today in the Commons, the government said it would consider the implications of the report.
The conclusion that the Russian state was probably involved in the murder of Mr Litvinenko is deeply disturbing. It goes without saying that this was a blatant and unacceptable breach of the most fundamental tenets of international law and of civilised behaviour.
But the opposition criticised the government's response.
I am not sure it goes anywhere near enough in answering the seriousness of the findings in this report. Indeed, it could send a dangerous signal to Russia that our response is too weak.
Today, two of the most powerful men in Russia were named as likely responsible for what's been described as an act of nuclear terrorism on the streets of London, a murder which a decade on remains a defining issue between the two countries. Corera, BBC News.